Hello, everyone, and welcome to Schwab Coaching. My name is Cameron May. I'm a Senior Manager of Trading and Derivatives Education here at Schwab, and this is Getting Started with Thinkorswim. And today we're going to be exploring a powerful tool on the Thinkorswim platform. It's one that I've discovered to be sort of among our most popular, and it is the Stock Hacker tool, which allows a trader to go out there and find the kinds of stocks that they might be interested in trading or investing in. We're going to be setting up a custom scan on that Stock Hacker. We're going to be taking a look at things from a fundamental perspective, more of an investing outlook. We're going to take a look at setting up a scan from a technical or chart perspective. It should be just about something for just about everybody. Before we can get to any of that, though, let me first of all say hello to everybody chatting in out there on YouTube. Great to see so many familiar names again. Hello there, Eva and Sharon, Dragon Rider 108, Tony, Life in the Fast Lane, Lola, David, everybody else. Thanks for joining us week after week. As I always say and I always mean, we do appreciate your attendance and your contributions here in these discussions. If you're here for the very first time, though, I want to welcome you as well. And if you're watching on the YouTube archive after the fact, we'll enjoy the presentation, but be aware that you're invited to join us in the live discussion. This webcast series kicks off on Wednesdays, promptly at 2 Eastern time. We'd love to have you here in the live stream audience if you want to join us. And I also want to let everybody know that here in the live stream, we have my very good friend Kevin Horner is going to be hanging out in the chats. Kevin's going to be addressing any questions that I can't get to during the natural flow of the presentation. As long as those questions aren't too far off track, Kevin's there to pick up the slack. So thanks for being there, Kevin. Kevin and I would also like to issue an invitation to everybody watching. If you have an account on X, give us a follow there. You should be following your favorite presenters on X. It's another great educational resource. You can find Kevin there at Kevin Horner CS. You can find me on X at Cameron May CS. And it is the very best place to connect with me in between these live streams. But let's get right into this. And of course, as we go to explore these tools on the Thinkorswim desktop platform, we need to first recognize that there is risk in trading and investing. So these disclosures are important. Please bear them in mind. The information here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered an individualized recommendation or endorsement of any particular security, chart pattern, or investment strategy. Schwab does not recommend the use of technical analysis as a sole means of investment research. Any investment decision you make in your self-directed account is solely your responsibility. And investing involves risks, including the loss of principal. All right. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about. We have about going to spend maybe 35, 45 minutes together today acquainting ourselves with the Stock Hacker tool on the Thinkorswim desktop platform. I want to emphasize that this is on a desktop platform because there actually are several versions of Thinkorswim. We have the desktop software, which can be downloaded free of charge from your Schwab Online account. We also have Thinkorswim Web, which can be accessed using URL anytime you have an internet connection, but it's different. And of course, there's the app, Thinkorswim Mobile. This is on the desktop platform. So let me just quickly remind everybody where to find that. If you logged into your Schwab Online account, you just pop over here to the Trade tab, and you can download Thinkorswim Desktop right here. It doesn't cost anything, but it gives access to the paper money account that we typically use in these demonstrations. Also, we can access our live trading accounts through this platform. You just click on Thinkorswim Desktop, scroll down just a bit, and you'll see this big blue button that says Learn How to Enable Thinkorswim. You click on that. That'll walk you through the process of the download, and it'll create an icon on your computer's desktop and add Thinkorswim to your start menu. And you just log in using your Schwab login credentials. All right. But that will take you to Thinkorswim Desktop, which I now have loaded up on your screen at this moment. Now, right now, we're just looking at the chart of the S&P 500, but with the S&P just continually pushing higher and higher and now less than 1% below all-time highs, I think that stocks are on the minds of a lot of investors and traders out there. But each of those people have their own idea of what they would like for their portfolio. Some might have an interest in a specific sector. Others might have an interest in the growth or value metrics of a stock, and still others might trade things using charts. So how might we put together a search, a scan, a filter, a screen for whatever it is that trader or investor is interested in finding? That's done here on the Scan tab on Thinkorswim Desktop. Now, we're talking about stocks today, so we're going to be using a tool called the Stock Hacker. There are other similar hackers or scan tools for other types of trading, but we're going to be talking about stocks today. So I'm going to go to the Stock Hacker, and that's going to bring us to this screen. Now, mine has been set to the defaults. If you have some things in here cluttering things up and you just want to start from a blank slate, here's how you do that. You come up here to the little menu up in the upper right and just choose Reset. That's going to erase any of the criteria that you might have previously plugged in and forgot about. You just want them out of the way. You reset this. It'll ask you, are you sure? You click yes, and that takes you to where we are right now. So let's start from looking at this through the lens of that first timer who's never used the Stock Hacker before. So we want to acquaint ourselves with the navigation, really just going from the top down, left to right. So up here in the upper left, just under Stock Hacker, you'll notice that we can scan through all stocks out there, or we can direct our scan to specific corners of the marketplace. So as an example, we might direct this to just scan in our current personal watch lists. We might also scan through public watch lists that are built and published and maintained by Thinkorswim. And that's what I'm going to do right now. Let's go down here to the public watch list. How about we just want to scan in the NASDAQ composite, those thousands of stocks that represent the NASDAQ composite. So I'm going to select that. So this is going to filter out anything that's not a NASDAQ composite stock. And right now, you'll notice as I've done this, there are about 2,800 stocks that we're going to be looking through in today's example. Now, had we not put on that filter, there'd be about 12,000. So we've already taken a big step toward narrowing that field. This is just for example purposes, though. Just remember, this is not me saying this is the way to put together a scan, but just as we're learning these tools, think about how you might customize this tool. We should all feel empowered to just customize it to however we think we need to best approach the markets for the purposes of our own portfolio, right? Now, I could also intersect this with something else. Now, if I click on this, I get that same menu. Sometimes a trader might want to look in, well, let's look at the S&P 500 and intersect that with, let's say, our own watch lists that we've created and see which of our watch lists have S&P 500 component companies that match the other criteria that we enter. That sort of a thing. I'm not going to be intersecting this with another filter today, or we could also exclude something from those menus. I'll let you play with those on your own, but for today, we're just going to be scanning in the NASDAQ composite stocks as our example. Now, as we go down below, we start to describe to the system what it is we're looking for. And once we've accurately described what we want, the system will go out and find stocks that meet those criteria. Now, by default, it's going to give us the option to look for 3 stock-specific criteria. So let's do that. Now, I will say, as we do this, we're not limited just to stock criteria. I threw out as a teaser at the launch of this session that we're going to be talking about technical filters. So we'll make sure that we do that a little bit later. But for right now, how about we build an example scan? Let's put ourselves in the seat, in the shoes of let's say, maybe a more fundamentally oriented investor. They don't really care about charts, or maybe in their personal approach, they don't really use those technical tools, but they're more interested in the quote unquote health of the company behind the stock. And the performance of that company, in their view, is likely to lead where the stock goes, among other influences, obviously. Well, let's start to describe to the system for our hypothetical trader what that trader is looking for. Let's say, first of all, maybe our trader isn't really interested in lower capitalization stocks, small companies. Maybe they're not interested in the volatility that tends to be inherent to a lot of those kinds of companies. So as our first criteria from our default menu, let's come down here and choose market capitalization. And you'll notice here it says $M, which means we're going to be looking for millions of dollars. Okay, well, that's going to be the default unit. Before I go any further, though, I do want to just address what exactly we're talking about with market cap. Sometimes I use trading terminology and not everybody can follow along. Market cap describes the size of the company. So when we hear small cap, mid cap, large cap, we're talking about how big companies are. And they are categorized according to their total value by taking the number of shares that are traded times the price per share. So if we have a stock that's trading at $100 and there are a million shares that have been created, that is a $100 million company. And that would fit firmly in the small cap, actually micro cap category. Companies with a total value, price times share volume, below $2 billion are considered small cap. $2 billion might sound like a lot of money to you or me, but in the grand schemes of the markets, that's not a ton of money. Between $2 and $10 billion are the mid cap stocks, and then above 10 billion. Did I say million? Billion. Make sure we're talking about B's here all the way along. 2 to 10 billion is the mid cap. 10 billion and larger are those large cap companies. So let's say that our investor, maybe they've drawn their personal line halfway into those mid cap stocks. Let's say we want at least a value of $5 billion. So if I put in 5,000, that is 5,000 million or a billion. And we won't put a cap on how big these companies are, but notice companies get pretty big nowadays. We're now into the trillions in market cap for individually traded companies out there. All right, so that's one of our criteria. And there are 476 NASDAQ composite companies that meet that criteria. So we're narrowing the field dramatically already. Next up, let's say our trader has a preference for, maybe a fundamental characteristic. Maybe they're a value investor. And they want to find among those medium cap to large cap stocks, those that are trading at least through one technical lens, a potential value. And one measure of value for some investors is the SOX PE ratio, comparing the current price to earnings over the last 12 months. And so let's choose here in our default menu, PE as our PE ratio. Mighty Mouse, welcome. Yep, better late than never is exactly right. Glad to have you here. But for our PE ratio, let's set a minimum of 8 as an example and a maximum of 20. What that means is that the current price is trading at not less than 8 times earnings over the last 12 months. So if it was $1 in net earnings per share, our minimum price would be $8, but not more than 20 times earnings for the last year. So why? And I'm talking mostly providing a tool demonstration, but I also like to discuss the logic of these sorts of decisions along the way. Some investors don't like to see very low PE ratios because they might see it as somewhat of a vote of no confidence from traders of that stock. They may not think that what have been historically strong earnings are likely to continue into the future. So maybe they think that the stock is fairly valued or maybe even overvalued right now, even at a low ratio. So very low ratios can be seen as a red flag for some PE observers. High ratios can be seen as a red flag, meaning the price has gotten way out of whack maybe with earnings, and we're overpaying for what the company is delivering. So let's say that we have a range somewhere between 8 and 20. Lori says, what was the market cap for small cap? 2 billion or less. Yep, exactly right. Now, there can be, I will say, exactly right. Even that I have to kind of hedge and say there can be a difference of opinion. That's sort of the generally accepted definition, but obviously with market values fluctuating dramatically over the course of months and years, people can change their opinions on what is now small or what is now large. Okay. So now we have 463 companies that meet that specific criteria. Now, that does not mean that we have 463 companies that meet both criteria within the NASDAQ composite, but there will be some overlap. Just imagine what we call a Venn diagram. You've seen those little circles that have drawn, and there's an overlap. So there are going to be some of these companies that are $5 billion companies that are also trading at a PE ratio between 8 and 20. Well, let's add another from this list here. Let's say that our trader maybe is interested in dividends. Current dividend yield is around, it's a little bit less than 2% for companies paying dividends. Let's just say that our investor is okay with getting around average to maybe they prefer well above average if they're, now again here talking about the criteria that I've chosen as examples, I think it's fairly intuitive to understand why some investors might want to get at least an average yield. Not everybody requires that, but I think it just intuitively makes sense. Why not go for the really high yields? Well, companies that are paying extremely high yields could be doing that for a number of reasons. Maybe their stock price fell recently and it threw the dividend that they're paying recently out of whack with the current value of their stock. That can be hard to sustain for a long time. Also, even if they took it there intentionally, it can still be hard to continue writing checks conceptually that are very large. They're proportionally large to the value of the company. So yeah, very high dividends might be seen as a red flag by some. But there we go. So now we have 362 of our NASDAQ comp stocks paying between 2 and 6%. We have 463 with an 8 to 20 PE, and we have 476 that are 5 billion. If I click scan from here, you'll notice that we've already narrowed the field down to just 38 potential investment candidates. And for some traders, that may be perfectly adequate. This could create a decent watch list for them to go and select stocks from. Now, for others, they might want to be a little bit more selective. So we'll do that. Kevin says, can you post the link for this recording to review? Thank you. So Kevin, this will be posted. Let me thank you for suggesting that. It'll be posted unless we hit some technical hiccup. That's always a possibility. But this one is scheduled to be posted to our YouTube playlist. So make sure, first of all, if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, it's called Trader Talks Schwab Coaching Webcast. And you can subscribe to it by clicking on the little subscribe button right down the lower right-hand corner right now. Or you can go down below if you're watching on your phone or whatever, click on subscribe. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe. It only takes a second. But our Trader Talks Schwab Coaching YouTube channel is where we house webcasts like this. We record them and we post them here under playlists. So for example, if you wanted to find the playlist for this webcast series, which is called Getting Started with Thinkorswim, you'd go to Trader Talk Schwab Coaching Webcasts on YouTube, click on playlists, and mine, you just scroll right on down to the bottom. There it is, Getting Started with Thinkorswim. It has Kevin's face on it because he was filling in for me last week. But if I click on View Full Playlist, that's where it will be found. There it is. Okay. And Kevin has posted this. Thank you, Kevin, for filling in and for posting. But yeah, do yourselves a favor and subscribe now if you haven't done that. But back here to creating our watch list, we've narrowed the field pretty dramatically. This is where if a trader starts to experiment with additional requirements, they could run out of stocks pretty quickly, because I know we all have in our minds this dream stock, all the characteristics that would describe the perfect stock. And then we go run a scan for that perfect stock. And the problem with perfection is it might not exist out there. I also want to throw out the caveat, even if we think we found perfection, it's not a guarantee of success. So remember that. But here's our problem. If I want to put on a fourth criteria, well, I can't. Uh-oh, we've run out of filters to use. No, actually, we can add another filter, just right up here where it says plus add filter. We click on that, and we can choose another stock filter. Notice these are described generically as stock filters. We could also look for options characteristics. We're not talking about options trading today, so I'm not going to use that. But we can look for fundamental characteristics as well beyond this default menu. So I'm going to go ahead and choose stock. Let's just show you what that does. That gives us the opportunity to go through this menu again, choose something else. For example, maybe our trader is interested in a stock with a market value of a certain minimum amount. I don't know. How about we just say $50? So among the 38 companies that meet all of these original criteria, wonder how many also are at least a $50 company. Let's click scan, see what we get, just 20. So notice we're narrowing it again. But for our fundamentally oriented investors out there, or even for the traders who might like to look at the health of the company behind the stock, behind the chart, you may want to also play around with this filter known as the fundamental filter. So with our stock menu, you'll notice we get this fairly in-depth, but also admittedly somewhat limited list of criteria to choose from. Well, if I choose fundamentals, the word fundamental is what a trader or an investor would say when they're talking about it, the company, not the stock, but the company. Hey, what's going on with the PE ratio, with the PEG ratio, with the all sorts of other value and growth metrics that can be found under fundamentals. So I'm going to click on this, and you'll notice I have a whole new set to choose from. And how about from this, let's say our investor is maybe they're just interested in profits. They have a value metric here in the form of a PE ratio. Maybe they also want to see a growth metric, a traditional growth metric like the net profit margin. And maybe they only want to see companies that are generating at least a 10% return from each dollar of revenue. All right. Well, there are 2,000 companies that are generating at least that 10% net profit margin. But let's click scan, see how many of our 20. All right, we've narrowed it down to 17. So John says, can you do a cross scan like a filter on a stock and an option? Could, John? Yes. Yeah, using these other filters. I'm not going to do it today because that might cause us to wander off the path into the options realm. And I'm not going to do that. But yes, adding options filters here allows us to stack them up. Also, we're going to be talking about doing technical or chart filters. And we could do those in combination with these fundamental filters. As a matter of fact, I will do that a little bit today. But yeah, we can do some sort of cross-pollination of these different approaches. But there we go. Our trader might choose one of these companies from the list. What they can know is that if it's showing up on the list down here, it meets the criteria as described above. So all of these 17 companies are NASDAQ composite component companies. They are at least $5 billion in net market capitalization. PE ratios between 8 and 20. Yield, dividend yield between 2 and 6%. They're at least $50 stocks, and they have a net profit margin of at least 10%. Now, am I telling you that these 5 criteria are the end-all, be-all for a potential fundamental investor? Nope, this is just for demonstration purposes only. Now, before I move on to the second custom scan example, I do want to show that we can change the way things are displayed. And also, we can save this scan so we don't have to go through this whole process every time we want to go out and look for similar stocks. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about customizing the display down here. By default, it'll show 50 stocks. Now that's fine because there's only 17 to be displayed here, but if there were more than that, we could choose to display more. We could also choose to show if we're doing some cross-pollination there, John, we could look at the stocks, we could look at the options. I'm just going to be looking at stocks today. They can be sorted by symbol by default, but we can also sort by other metrics. And we can choose those metrics. So for example, maybe we just want to sort by the market price. When we say mark on Thinkorswim, I think of it as an abbreviation for market price. So if I sort by market price, and let's leave it as ascending for just a moment. I'm going to click scan, and what that just did is it sorted them here. Also, another way that you can look at market price is just what's called the last price. That's very similar. It's the last price the stock traded for. Not always exactly the same, but very similar, especially with good liquid stocks. And you can see how those are now ascending in price. Our symbols are not in alphabetical order like they were before, but this is now sorted by price. Now we can do the same thing. Don't have to use this menu here. We can just click on the column heading and sort by whatever column we have there. So right now, it's going from smallest volume to largest. Or if I click on it again, it's going to show us the largest company that's qualified according to our metrics. And we could change that organization down here by clicking on column headings, or we could change it up here by going from ascending to descending, back and forth there. So be aware that this display is not static. We can customize that as well. And a final thing that I definitely want us to be aware of is that, hey, you might look at this and say, well, I have all these columns. There's market cap over there. That's nice because that was one of my criteria. maybe I'm not interested necessarily in exactly what the default columns are, but we can customize that list of columns by clicking on this little gear. Let's choose customize, and we can start to build a custom column set. Let me just click and drag this over to the right, just so we can see the original criteria. What if we were to look for like yield? Let's add yield. I'm going to add that to our list of columns. By default, it's going to show up as the last column. That would display it over here to the far right, or we could just highlight it and move it up. Let's move that right up next to the last price of the stock. So if I click OK from there, you'll now see, oh, it's kind of squished in there. It's that little series of dots. I'm going to click and drag that. So somebody asked about the click and drag features. There's a second time I clicked and dragged the pop-up window over. Look for click and drag features here as well. But now I can see the yield for each of these companies. And if yield is the greatest emphasis out of all these criteria, we can click on that and change the order so that I'm seeing the highest yielding company that meet all of my criteria. Pretty nifty. So now we're all set. Our trader could pick a stock right there, off the races, or maybe what they'd like to do is preserve this scan so they can come back and revisit it anytime at a click. Here's what we might do if we want that. Right up here in this menu, up here under where it says on demand, I'm going to click on that. And oh, pardon me, I'm one just below that. We're going to save the scan query. I'm going to save this scan. And I'm just going to call this maybe demo. This is just as an example. This is my demonstration or my example fundamentals. I'll call them fundies. There we go. So let's save that. You can give it any name you like. But then if we were to, let's say we had reset this scan, and we come back to the scan tab and we think, you know what, I'd like to run that fundamental search that I set up before, but I don't want to go through and put in all those criteria. I can't remember how I did it before anyway. We'll come back to that same menu. Let's load that scan query, and let's go to our personal demonstration fundies. There it is. That brings up the original scan. Click scan. There are the current stocks. Now they're going to be the same 17 stocks we just found before, but they very well could be different tomorrow and Friday and next week. Now, one other function when saving that scan query, this is kind of nifty. These 17 stocks have already automatically been imported into a new watch list. We didn't even have to do anything special. It's just already there. Let's go over to the left column. I'm going to go to our watch lists up here, and let's look in our personal watch list, and you'll notice that this scan is now also treated like a watch list. This is another way to access current stocks from this scan. If I go to Demo Fundies, Demonstration Fundamentals, there are the 17 stocks found here. We could customize the columns if we wanted to here. That's it. Yeah, that's a nifty little tool. John P. says, are there scans on sectors, across, or within? Yes. Yep, we could scan up here. Go down to by industry there, John, and you can see we can choose the different sectors, and we can look at the whole thing or individual sub-industries within that sector. Yeah, good questions. All right. So that's just an example fundamentals scan. As I said before, though, not everybody's interested in fundamentals. Some traders would consider themselves to be more chartists. So wouldn't it be nice if Thinkorswim's scan tool could just go out and find stocks that are where their price is behaving in the way that I like to see? That's also possible through this scan tool. So I'm going to do this. Wipe the slate clean. Let's click on reset. Yes, I'm sure I've already saved this. It's okay. I can access it again now anytime I like. But let's go back to our charts. And you'll notice here I've loaded up a couple of what we call moving averages. These are simple moving averages. If you're not familiar with them, they are relatively short-term in the way that I've structured them. These are relatively short-term trend lines. One's quite short-term, and the other one's still short-term, just not as short-term. And so for some traders, they might look at the interplay between these moving averages as generating potential buy and sell signals. Now, moving averages can be trend lines. They can also act as potential support and resistance areas. If you're not familiar with these, let me make a suggestion for you. Okay, because I'm not really, this isn't a webcast on how to do technical analysis. This is how to use the tools on Thinkorswim. But having already made sure that you are subscribed to our YouTube channel, you can go to our YouTube channel, Trader Talk Schwab Coaching Webcasts, and do a search right here. Let me type in the word, what I'm doing here is we're using simple moving averages. So I'm going to type in the word simple. And if I hit enter, you'll notice, hey, there are a bunch of webcasts here that have covered what these things are, including, here's one that I delivered. It's called Trading Simple, Exponential, and Whole Moving Average, what are called crossovers. Well, guess what? We're talking about a crossover system today. So let's say that our trader looks at this faster trend line, and anytime it crosses up and through the slower trend line, so in that case, the green crossing up above the red, maybe that's a buy signal to them. As long as the did I say the green crossing up above red? The red crossing up above the green. If you want to know the particulars here, this is a 5-period moving average and a 20-period moving average. You can see that right up there, 5 and 20. All right, but let's just say that our technical trader is looking for this sort of a scenario. Yep, John P., the 5 and the 20. Yeah, they want to see, are there stocks out there where the 5 is maybe just today or just recently crossing up and through the 20? Well, we can do a scan for that. Let's go do a scan. Let's go back to our stock hacker. And let's say that maybe our trader still isn't interested, just conceptually, in very small stocks. Maybe it's just not part of their approach. So possible they might use that same, and this is just to illustrate that we can use the knowledge that we already have regarding these screens or scans and start to build on it, combine the techniques that we've previously learned. So let's say our trader here is interested in market capitalization, but maybe their low end is $2 billion. But maybe they've capped it. Maybe they prefer to stay in that mid cap range. So let's take this up to $10 billion or 10,000 million. And maybe they're also interested in, let's say, current price. Let's set our market price minimum of $100 a share. Maybe they don't like the low price stocks. This is not me saying again that there is a right or a wrong way to do trading. This is just a demonstration of how these tools might be implemented depending on how the trader has decided for themselves to approach the markets. Anyway, so we're going to look for $100 stocks from those $2 to $10 billion companies. And maybe we don't even need this third stock criteria. Well, if I don't need it, I can just delete it. Click on the little X and it's gone. But now let's tell the system the specific charting behavior we were interested in. And in this case, we were looking for the 5-period moving average crossing up above the 20-period moving average. So that is a different type of filter. That is what we call a study filter. The field of using charts we call technical analysis. And technical traders use chart studies or chart indicators. Indicators, studies, that's kind of an interchangeable term in technical speak. So let's choose study. And now we have all of these studies. Of course, I'd love to go through these one at a time. I'm going to leave that to you to explore on your own. But let's go to one. It's since we're talking about crossovers, let's choose crossovers. And we're going to choose specifically a moving average crossover. Here we go. Now notice what this has done. This now has 2 moving averages. And all we need to do is change the length or the speed of the moving average. By default, it's going to be a 15-period against a 30-period. Well, let's say our trader was more interested in the 5-period. Could choose simple, exponential, weighted, Wilder's, Hull. You want to see what those mean? What do you think you'd do? Go to the webcast playlists. Just do a search. Okay, but we're going to leave this as a simple moving average. The 5 crossing above could go below for bearish, but let's go above for bullish, the 20 simple moving average. Now, we could come over here and change some other inputs. We could change this from the simple moving average using closing values or opening values or high plus low divided by 2, an average value. We're just going to stick with close, and we're going to stick with daily candles. Oh, Brian says, I'm not permissioned to use study filters. Brian, thank you for pointing that out, because these study filters are only available on the live platform. They're not available on Paper Money. So that's why you're getting that error. That's it. Not anything you're doing. It's just this is a live only tool. Okay. So this is sort of a fake live only account that I've had created that we've been provided with as presenters. Okay. Yep. So notice up here, it doesn't say that this is a Paper Money account. It doesn't say simulated trading. Yep. Kevin, thank you for a little clarification there. But let's do a scan. Let's see in the, and actually, how about we route this one to the, let's do this in the NASDAQ composite as well. So here we are looking for mid-cap companies priced at least $100 in the NASDAQ composite that are showing a 5 crossing above the 20 simple moving average crossover today. I know that's pretty precise, but technicians tend to be pretty precise by nature. There might not be any. I don't know. Let's run a scan. Let's see what we get. All right. Looks like we got 4. Brian, you're just trying to learn? Yeah, there you go. No, you're in the right place. Yep. I'm glad you asked the question, because I intended to highlight that and I just forgot. All right. So let's look at some of these companies. According to our scan, Dave and PLX and PNFP should have a crossover just today. So let's look at these. DAVE. Look at that. Ooh, if I zoom in, here's our 5 crossing over our 20. And so what a typical trader of this system would be looking for is that 5 popping up above the 20 like we have right here. And that might be a signal the stock is likely to run. And in the case of the most recent crossover, it's the way it worked out. It doesn't always work out. You can get periods like this where you get what we call, I don't even know if there's a really good example. I kind of went in too close. Let me activate that drawing because it doesn't look like that's making the point I wanted to. Right here it does. No, it doesn't. Anyway, the idea here is sometimes we'll get a crossover where it will seem to signal it's time to get in, and then it crosses right back down and it signals to get right back out, and it wasn't profitable. Oh, there's an example right there. Let me get rid of this one. There's what we'd call a whipsaw. Saying, hey, Cameron, get in. Oops, nope, get right back out. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That's the nature of charting. But in any case, if we zoom in here, we can see, ooh, look at our 5 just crossing our 20. That scan did an excellent job of catching that right at that moment. Pretty rare to catch it at that moment. There are only 4 companies in the NASDAQ, those mid-cap $100 companies, that are showing that sort of signal today. Let's see our other one. Let's do one more from that list. PLX. Oh, PLXS, what was that? PLXS. There we go. Does it have a signal? Yep, look at that. Just crossing, the 5 is just crossing up above the 20. So a typical entry would be here, typical exit right there, and it's just signaling to get back in again today. So that's one technical tool. Just as an example here, how about we do another one? What if our trader is looking for something like, maybe their interest is in stocks that have been going up. So they're looking for uptrending stocks. It's been a strong market, so possibly they're only interested in stocks that are trading right at or near their highs for the year. How might we see that using a technical study? Well, let me come over here to studies, up to add filter and study. And that is actually a price performance metric. So we're going to look for prices near highs. So we're choosing as our criteria near high lows. We could also be looking for stocks that are near lows if the trader is looking for something bearish, or maybe it's a value investor looking for a turnaround candidate. In any case, let's look for mid-cap companies, $100 per share or more, NASDAQ component companies that are within, let's say, 3% of their 252 period highs. Why 252 periods? Well, that's basically a year, 252 trading days in a year. But let's click scan now. And we have, looks like, maybe a dozen companies that are trading within 3% of their 252-day highs. Let's grab one. How about CAR? Avis. Did the system do a good job of finding a stock that's trading up near its highs? Yup. This is a stock that actually recently accelerated. Maybe our technical trader sees this as a possible emerging bull flag pull. And they wait for a pullback and an entry. Now, these are all just examples. Guys, I'm going to be setting you loose here in just a moment. But one final thing that I wanted to talk about, since really the theme here is building custom scans. Have any of you experimented with a custom study filter? This is pretty nifty. So we have all these default study filters, or maybe the trader has in mind their own preferred technical study. Well, if we choose custom, we can use what's called the condition wizard. Now, by default, there's going to be one called the ADX crossover. I don't need that. We're going to add our own condition. So this is going to be a study condition. And how about, let's just use that simple moving average combination that we were using before, just as our example. But there are all kinds of technical tools that can be chosen here, including, for example, the TTM squeeze that I talked about in a webcast series last week. Let's just choose our simple moving average. Let's choose as our length of 5 again. And we want that 5 period to be crossing above. Notice it's just menu driven. So we just acquaint ourselves with the menus and the navigation becomes fairly straightforward. Another study. Let's just do another simple moving average. And this one's going to be our 20. Now, the advantage here is that we can customize this even further. By default, the one that I just chose from the default menu is just looking for simple moving average crossovers today. Well, maybe I'm okay even if it's a few days old within the last 3 bars. These are daily bars. So we'll just run it that way. Let's save that and click OK. So now we're looking for a 5-period moving average crossing above the 20-period moving average within the last 3 days or bars. See, there's the length of the bars right there. If I click scan, hey, there's I think Dave probably just backed off. There's PLXS. Dave was so close, DAVE. I think probably the 5 just slipped back down below the 20. It's no longer qualified. It's no longer crossing over. But we have a few more candidates because there are more crossovers in the last 3 days than there have been in the last 5, or just the last day. But guys, we've covered quite a bit. I hope this has been an interesting examination of what I consider to be a pretty powerful tool. There's a lot more to it that you can explore on your own. Do it within your paper money account because that's where we can do things without having any real skin in the game, no real risk. But we've accomplished what I set out to do today. I wanted to talk the new user of thinkorswim through using these powerful scan tools. We looked at a fundamental approach. We looked at a technical approach. Customize that approach to whatever suits your preferred approach to the management of your portfolio, if you're going to use it at all. All right. But I hope you enjoyed that discussion. This is what we do on Wednesdays. I hope you'll put it in your personal calendar to join me each Wednesday. I'm going to let you go, but as you do, remember the other resources you have available. Of course, you have our YouTube channel. So pop down to the lower left or lower right-hand corner, click on the subscribe button or click on subscribe down below the video stream. It only takes a second. It doesn't cost anything, but our channel is where we house those playlists. for our previous webcasts. You can also join the live streams here or do searches for webcasts on a specific topic of interest. Second thing is, if you have an account on X, give us a follow. You should be following your favorite presenters on X. You can follow Kevin there at Kevin Horner CS. You can follow me there at Cameron May CS. So if you're trying to track me down, there's my handle right there. There's the guy you're dealing with. Also, make sure that you always click the thumbs up if you liked one of our webcasts. That helps the webcast, gives it a boost in the YouTube algorithm. It's a nice pat on the presenter's back as well. And finally, I do think that there was a survey, wasn't there? Yep. Thanks, Kevin, for reposting that a couple of times. Yeah, if you do me the favor, click on that survey link. Give me some honest feedback. It's always appreciated. It's only 2 multiple choice questions, a comments box and a suggestion box. But if you take the time to fill out our surveys, I take time to read through that data. It always helps. All right, everybody. Thanks for giving me your time today. I will see you in a future webcast. I'll also look for you on X, but whenever I see you again, until that moment arrives, I want to wish you the very best of luck. Happy trading. Bye-bye.